Szia! Ez itt a Szabadon Podcast, ahol nehéz önismereti témákról beszélgetünk könnyedén, tabuk nélkül. Én dr. Horváth Kitti vagyok, life és business coach, viselkedéselemző, jogász. Ezen a csatornán olyan témákról szeretnék beszélgetni, amik téged foglalkoztatnak, így minden adás előtt felteheted a kérdéseidet az Instagram oldalamon, amit Dr. Horváth Kitti néven találsz meg, vagy e-mailben is bátran ír üzenetet a drhorvathkitti@gmail.com címen. Ebben az évadban szó lesz megfelelési kényszerről, önbecsülésről, párkapcsolatról, családról, és persze karrierről és hivatásról is. Ha érdekelnek ezek a témák, tarts velem! Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to have you here with me as we dive into an incredibly important and sensitive topic, the psychology of affairs, and how emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, can help couples heal and rebuild trust. We're going to explore what causes infidelity, how it impacts relationships, and how we can rebuild emotional connection and trust after an affair. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Professor Dr. Scott Woolley, who is one of the original EFT therapist trainers. He holds the rank of Distinguished Professor in the Couple and Family Therapy program in the California School of Psychology at Alliant International University. He's a founder and director of the San Diego Center for Emotionally Focused Therapy and the executive director of the Training and Research Institute for EFT at Alliant. He recently has received an honorary doctoral degree from Semmelweis University. I'm truly honored to have him share his insights with us. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today and accepting my invitation. I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you, Kitty, and I'm delighted to be here.
First, let's start by exploring what you believe are the main psychological factors behind infidelity, or in other words, extradyadic relations. So, what do you think are the most common reasons for infidelity? And are there any particular relationship patterns to make couples more vulnerable to it?
Yes, and yes, that's a big question, okay, and an important one. I guess I'd like to first start off and just talk about how I'm defining infidelity, okay, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I think that's important. The way that when I'm talking about infidelity, the way I talk about it, or the way I think about it, is that it's a violation of the boundaries that the couple sets up for their romantic or sexual engagement. Okay. So most couples, monogamous couples, see having sexual relations in any form outside of the relationship or romantic involvement with others outside of the relationship as a major violation. So that would be infidelity. However, there are some couples who have sexually open relationships, who have other kinds of arrangements. And in that case, anything that's agreed upon by the two would not be considered infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to start there. The psychology of infidelity is complex. There are different types. There are different situations. Kind of one way I think about it is there's different roads into infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are different roads into infidelity, there's also kind of different roads in healing the impact of infidelity on relationships, okay, which is incredibly important. Broadly speaking, some infidelity, one of the motivations behind the infidelity is very much connected to what's happening in the couple relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's because people are maybe they are resentful or angry at their partner in one way, and there can be kind of revenge. It can be also what I call the come and get me affair, where somebody is kind of having an affair. Maybe they don't want to go all the way, but they're trying to make their partner feel jealous. Sometimes people get burned out in the relationship, and then they go into they have affairs as a part of, okay, I don't want to leave my partner, but I'm so exhausted. Sometimes it is like, maybe I can experiment with another relationship and see if that would be better. Those are all pretty relationally oriented. Another broad category is those that I call them kind of the romantic affair, although many affairs involve romance, but they're kind of escape affairs, actually. It will happen when people are under lots and lots of pressure. And the affair really is like, for those people, like a release valve for the pressure, an unhealthy release valve, a destructive release valve, but it is a release valve in that they get to escape the problems in their life by getting involved in a romantic kind of affair. Mm-hmm. Okay. And romance is very powerful. Sometimes those affairs can go on for many years. They start as an escape, and people will go back and forth between one relationship and another. So that's another kind of broad category. And then the third is those that are really motivated more by people's insecurities deep down inside. Some people are scared that the relationship will not last. Instead of working it out with the partner, they go outside. Other people, sex addiction is another thing that can have a big impact, and we can talk about that as well. Sometimes affairs are about power too. And it's more of an individual psychology kind of thing for people. We see this particularly in men who have affairs. They kind of feel powerful when they're bedding women and or other people if they're gay. Those, again, a different kind of motivation than, say, somebody who's trying to escape problems or they're just not close with their partner. So that's a long answer to your question, but hopefully helpful.
Thank you so much. It definitely is. And I've read your typology in a 2018 study. And I was wondering if you find any type of infidelity harder or easier to work with in therapy, because I've read that these relational driven types of infidelities are maybe there's a bigger chance that the betraying partner is more willing to work on the relationship. So that's what I thought. Maybe they would be easier, but I'm curious about your opinion.
Oftentimes, yes. I think the hardest one is those who are just kind of exiting the relationship because they're burned out. And a lot of times they don't want to work or they're ambivalent about the relationship in the first place. And it takes a lot of work to repair when there's been an affair. Those who, when it's a come and get me kind of affair, or, there's other kinds that that are relationally oriented, a lot of times the person who had the affair is more willing to work as they feel more of a connection with the partner. Sometimes, though, with some of the other ones, you'll see people who want to work and then those who do not. It just depends. I've seen some kind of romantic affairs. A lot of times people with romantic affairs will kind of split themselves, live two lives. And that splitting themselves is, it's easy. It's easy to go from one person to another person, then back to the one, back to the other. They don't have to be open. And that can be very challenging. Some of the other ones, power, people who are into power, that one can be a big challenge because it's so hard for them to let go of the power. They oftentimes have gender issues too. You've got to work on those. Anyway, yeah, some are easier, some are harder, but one of the key factors really is how hard are people willing to work?
And I suppose another really important factor is the attachment style, of course. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, how attachment styles affect infidelity?
Yes. Well, in attachment styles, I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with attachment styles, but basically most secure people don't turn outside the relationship. Okay. And consequently don't have affairs. Typically, it's people who are more insecure. Whatever the problem is, the more secure you are, the more likely you are to work it out in healthy, constructive ways. If there's distance in the relationship, which happens because life happens, right? And all couples go through periods of time when there may be more distance, but the more secure people are, the more they work on reconnecting with each other, turning to each other for comfort when there's stresses rather than turning outside of the relationship. The more insecure attachment styles fall into two categories. Three really, but one is people who are, we call them having an anxious style, where when they are threatened, when there's challenges, they're likely to ramp up, become anxious, and oftentimes they will try to connect with their partner, or they'll get very angry, they'll be loud, etc. The other one is people who are more avoidant. And when there's a challenge, their natural kind of reaction is to shut down. They don't want to rock the boat. They want to keep things from getting worse. They go inside themselves and they pull away. They hate conflict. Sometimes they'll fight, but most of the time they're going to pull away. And that creates problems. And then the other style really is a mix of the first two, okay, where sometimes people will be avoidant, sometimes people will be anxious. They use different strategies in different circumstances. So people's attachment styles absolutely can play a part both in whether they have affairs or not, because the more secure you are, the less likely you are to have an affair, and also the types of affairs. More importantly, in the process of healing, people's kind of attachment styles, or I like to think about it as a landscape, because it's not just kind of one style versus the other. Sometimes people can come off as pretty secure in some situations. In other situations, it gets very dangerous for them, some relationships. But it plays an important role in healing it, because ultimately the process of healing involves getting people to be able to reconnect in safe ways that bring about healing. And we can go in more into that if you want, but
I know it's a big topic and question, and there are even, I saw typologies based on the attachment styles, but I know it's super complicated, so I might want to go to the effect of affairs. So how do you think infidelity impacts a couple's emotional bond, connection, and trust? And can you tell how EFT can help healing those after an affair?
Absolutely. Affairs generally are devastating, okay? They're extraordinarily painful, and often very painful for both the person that's unfaithful as well as the partner who is faithful. And I think that's important to remember. I've worked with a lot of affairs over the years, and I don't think I've ever seen any case where somebody's having an affair where the person having the affair isn't always not injured. They are injured, okay, but in different ways. What does it do to the bond? It's like for many couples, it's like having a bomb go off in the middle of their relationship. Okay, it's a disaster. Not all couples, but for many couples. Particularly the closer they have been, the stronger their commitment to each other, the deeper the betrayal when somebody turns outside of the relationship. And it sets up what we in emotionally focused therapy refer to as attachment injuries. Attachment injuries are injuries that aren't just deeply painful, but they call into question the very foundational assumptions of the relationship. It's like, who are you? I never thought you could ever do this. It's like, is our whole marriage a sham? For example, I remember a couple where, he'd been having multiple affairs. He had really compulsive sexuality addiction, and he'd had multiple affairs for 10 years of their relationship, and she didn't know. She felt like there was some distance, but, they had kids and, she had no idea. When it came out, it rocked her world. And it was like a very major trauma for her. Okay. In that it was hard for her to even function because it was like, who are you? A lot of times it's, I don't even want to see you, but wait a minute, I do. I feel a connection. I don't. There's a lot of kind of push-pull, a lot of PTSD. In that case, I didn't see them until after about a year or two after the affair was disclosed, and she still had very active PTSD around it, but they got better. I've also seen cases where it isn't quite so painful. It's always painful, but it doesn't always rock people's foundational beliefs about the other person. But it's always going to be painful. It's very easy to have classic PTSD symptoms, particularly because people usually have to rewrite the history of their relationship. It's like, oh, what was my partner doing then? I thought my partner was with me. What happened then? How long has this been going on? And that process is also impacted by how the infidelity comes out. But before we get there, one of the questions comes up is, all right, if somebody's been unfaithful, does that always need to be disclosed? Or is it better that somebody just doesn't know? Professionals have differences of opinion on that. Okay. Just, having done therapy for about 36 years now, having worked with a lot, my sense of that is if the relationship is really going to heal, it has to come out. Even if it was 20 years ago and it happened one time, what ends up happening is the guilt, the regrets. A lot of times people have to kind of wall off a part of themselves so that they can be with their partner. And what happens is that it makes it difficult for them to really connect. So if the relationship is going to get better, it needs to come out. Now, are there circumstances when you may have to be careful about the timing and making sure the other person's in good shape? Absolutely. Okay. But it does need to come out. Now, kind of going back, how are they hurt? They're hurt in many, many different ways. If it comes out slowly, okay, so lots and lots of people who've been unfaithful, they're terrified of telling their partner. Okay. I've helped people do it. It is much better if they get the whole thing out for their partner, although they need to go based on what their partner can handle, not what they would like. Okay. What oftentimes happens, and this is very destructive, is they'll share some circumstances. They don't go the whole way. Like, yes, I did kiss this person and, we snuggled and we kissed a few times, but that was it. And then, okay, yes, we were we did fondle each other, but we didn't have intercourse. Okay. When in fact they did have intercourse. So they say it happened once when it actually had been happening 20 times or whatever, They do this confession that is, or disclosure that is kind of just slow. And every time the person turns around, there's another piece. That is incredibly, incredibly painful. Most people would much rather get the whole thing. I've sat with couples where, one person's had an affair, and we sometimes will spend 2 hours going through the whole thing at the pace of the injured partners or the faithful partners, how fast they can handle it. Okay. Because you need to tune into them and what they can handle. Sometimes people, who have been unfaithful, once they start talking about it, they feel so awful having lied so much that they just blurt it all out. And then they're not attuned to where the other person is. Or they'll blurt out 90%, they'll hold back 10%, right? And then the person thinks that it's all out when it's not. Anyway, it does need to come out eventually, but under circumstances that are respectful of the other partner, that are going to lead to healing and building a relationship that is strong and intimate and honest and connected.
You said that both of the parties are hurt, right? It comes with a tremendous amount of shame, I suppose, on behalf of the betraying partner. And I was wondering, how do you, as a therapist, address that shame while still acknowledging the pain of the betrayed partner? I imagine it can be a super tricky part of the therapy.
Yes. It can be a difficult part of the therapy. And let me just talk about shame in general. Shame is it's the emotion associated with I am bad. And it's a disconnecting emotion. It doesn't connect to people. I've seen that one of the things that brings about healing is for the unfaithful partner to be able to see the pain of the faithful partner and have empathy for them and have regrets over the way the other person has been hurt by their actions. That's really important. Shame blocks that, because what ends up happening is that they see the pain in the other person and they feel horrible about themselves. And then they go into themselves, and then they're no longer with their partner. And in fact, the partners may be talking about the pain of this, and again, they're disconnected, which is what was happening during the affair. Okay. Much of the pain is the pain of the betrayal and the subsequent disconnection. Okay. Or the related disconnection. Shame it's tricky, and there's different ways to deal with it. I'm going to tell you one of the more common ways that I do not think is helpful. Okay. And then I'm going to go into ways that I think are helpful. It's very common for therapists, for other people to kind of go in and justify the bad behavior. They're trying to help the person feel better by saying, oh, I'm sure that, it sounds like that your partner was very mad or difficult to be with. Of course, you turned out of the relationship. To normalize it. Well, lots of people have affairs. Okay. I think that is incredibly destructive. I don't think it's helpful. Okay. I think a much better approach is to allow people to be, first of all, responsible for their actions. which means not that, well, your partner wasn't giving you sex. I don't like that even the way that's framed, right? Giving you sex instead of sexually connecting. The two of you weren't sexually connecting. Your partner was ignoring you. Like, what's a person to do? I hate that. Okay. It suggests that somehow we are controlled by our environment or by our sexuality rather than we have choices on what we do with our behavior. So where I go is, in the end, yeah, your partner was distant, your partner didn't want to have sex, your partner had withdrawn, and that made it easier for you to step out of the relationship. But in the end, you made a choice. You didn't work it out with your partner. You didn't hang in there and try to figure out what was wrong. You stepped out. It was a choice. And it was a choice that was very hurtful for your partner and very hurtful for you, because I've had so many people say, I never would have imagined that I would ever do such a thing. So for most people who have affairs, it's like a violation of their own kind of moral code, and as well as in injuring their partner. I allow people to be responsible for their own behavior, but that doesn't mean they're bad. It means they did something bad. And that's really important, because I've seen when therapists sometimes will say, oh, lots of people have affairs. The injured partner is going, so you think this was okay? Are you kidding? Instead, it's like, in the end, you made a decision. And one of the things I'll say is you can make it easier for your partner to have an affair. You can make it harder for your partner to have an affair, but you cannot make your partner have an affair. Okay? Can't do it. That partner has to make a decision. I also talk about the fact that because you have done something bad doesn't mean that you are bad. And that's incredibly important. Okay? Many people are raised with this idea that you do something wrong, which means you're bad. Okay? And you hear it. Some parents will say, bad girl, bad boy, kind of thing, right? Instead of what you did was very bad. Let's see if we can understand it. Let's see if we can help you not go there. Okay? Which is what we do in therapy, in good therapy anyway. It's like, okay, we need to figure out how you made these decisions. One of the things that I help people with who go into that shame response is I work on helping them see that the pain that their partner has is a result of the loving, caring feelings that that person has toward them. It's not because they think that you are bad. It means it is because they feel so hurt because they love you so much. So that's one thing. Another thing is to help people. A lot of times, shame is, there's a fear that because I did this bad thing, I am a horrible person. And I sometimes will frame it sounds like you got mixed up. You get mixed up because you think because you did something bad that deeply hurt this person that you care about and hurt yourself, somehow that means you're bad. But yet you're sitting here trying to make it better. Doesn't that mean that there is good in you? If you, over the course of your life, have you really had deep down desires to hurt your partner? When you did this, did you really want to hurt your partner in this way? And almost everybody says no. I was just selfish, or I was this or that or the other, right? I was just so hurt. I was so mad. And it's like, even with people who get sexually addicted, who have had hundreds and hundreds of affairs. I've worked with that before. One guy that had about 300 affairs in a 10-year marriage. He was having several a week, oftentimes, sex addiction. It's like, yeah, you've got an addiction, you've got a serious problem, and you've done things that have hurt people and yourself, but that doesn't mean you're bad. That's not where your desires are. Good people, when they do bad things, feel bad because they are good, because it is a violation of their own moral code. So you can have regrets, you can feel bad about what you have done, how your partner's been hurt, and you're going to need to learn how to stay with your partner's pain to help it heal. But if you get mixed up and go into thinking you are bad, which isn't true, look where you are. Look what you're trying to do right now. If you get mixed up, your feelings like you are bad are going to consume you, and then you will not be able to help your partner heal. And it'll be very difficult to figure out how this is never going to happen again. So, that helpful? Yeah.
Yeah.
Shame blocks people all the time. But to summarize, you don't get out of shame by saying everybody does it, or it's normal, or of course you did it. That's not, you may get people to feel temporarily okay about themselves, but that's not the way you get out of it. You get them to focus on who they are deep down inside, their desires, their hopes, their over the course of their life, do they desire to hurt people over the course of their life? I'm not talking about when somebody was angry one night. Okay. I'm talking about deep down and fundamentally, no. And most people will say, no, that's not who I am. That's why I feel so bad. That's the truth. You have to hold on to the truth of your own goodness to heal this thing, which is so bad.
So as a therapist, it's super important to not work on the shaming and blaming level, but to go for the basic underlying emotional needs, right?
Absolutely. And certainly we as therapists never want to shame anybody. Okay. But we also need to be able to say, and yet the behaviors you made hurt this person you love deeply, and it hurts you. And so we need to repair it.
But oftentimes the betrayed partner gets caught up in the details, right? And they kind of get obsessed with how the affair has happened. And I'm assuming it really just fosters shame and blame. How do you shift to the emotional need level? How do you change the focus to the underlying emotional needs?
Well, there's a couple of things there. When they're really hurt, they may be shaming. You terrible, horrible person, I can't believe you did this, kind of thing. And, there are ways that we as therapists can help redirect that, help them focus on how they're hurt, as well as validating the heck out of their anger. It's okay that they're angry. Of course they're angry. They're living in a relationship that for 10 years they didn't know. They thought it was one way, and now they found out something very different. And yet they may have children with this person, etc. Right? We don't want to do that. We want to stop people who are injured, the betrayed partners, from shaming and criticizing, but do help them express their pain. And if the unfaithful partner's not in a position to really hear the pain, we as therapists need to hear it and validate it. It's very easy to get caught up in the details. Let's talk about that in the process. And part of it is it's very easy to become the affair police, and a lot of that's because they're trying to figure out their reality and what's going on. And particularly if if the betraying partner isn't being fully forthcoming and honest, a lot of times this becomes a cat and mouse game and trying to follow people. One of the things that is associated with healing is that the betraying partner makes concrete efforts to create safety for the other person.
Mm.
That can mean, and oftentimes does, sharing passwords, bank account information, turning on, the GPS locator thing on their phone so that their partner knows where they are. Lots and lots of couples, and I know some people are afraid that, geez, my partner's going to control me. Lots of couples have the GPS thing turned on, the Find My, so that they can just see where their partner is. Usually, if there's nothing to hide, why are you worried about it? Okay. I'm happy that my partner knows where I am, kind of thing, right? So they make concrete steps to provide security. But it's so traumatizing for the betrayed partner that oftentimes it's very easy to get caught up in the details and asking 20 questions, all the time. It becomes an interrogation. Where did you go? When did you do? What are you doing? What are you thinking about? Blah, 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 right? When that's happening, as you kind of suggested, typically people want to feel secure and connected, but they're going about it in a way that isn't going to bring security. I remember I've had couples where they're, the betrayed partner's doing that. And then I would ask, do you believe the response that your partner's giving you? No, because my partner's been lying to me for years. Okay. I don't want you to ask those questions. If you want to ask those questions, please, let's do it in here with me. But outside of here, you guys need a break from that. It's like what's really going on is you're just scared and you want to feel safe. And that's going to take some time. Can we talk about that fear? And a good therapist will go into the fears and pain, sadness, and hurt that is driving all those kind of rapid fire questions, if you will, that the questions being answered isn't going to reassure them. But going into the emotions, getting the couple emotionally connected, absolutely can help heal the real issues. And a lot of those questions don't become important once they really start emotionally connecting.
Thank you. One more thing about repairing the bond is, according to the attachment injury repair model, it's a crucial step to end the affair.
Absolutely.
Of course, in order to heal the injury. But as you mentioned, sometimes it's not so easy to end these affairs, especially if they're going on for years, right? So as a therapist, how exactly do you assess and ensure that the affair has actually been ended?
Good question. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because much of what we're talking about in healing is assuming that the affair has ended or affairs have ended, and that the betraying person really is motivated not to ever do it again, right? First of all, knowing if the affair ends. In the end, you can't 100% know, okay? But what you can do is you need to ask, and you need to ask repeatedly. There's one area in just the years I've worked with affairs. Sometimes I haven't circled back and asked enough. Typically when I get stuck in the healing process, there's no empathy. The person was still having the affair. So I've learned to ask often. One of the questions is how did it end? Well, I just haven't seen this person again. Okay, that's not good enough, right? Okay, that's very different than saying, I broke it off. I told this person that I'm going to make my marriage work. that that my partner knows, and I am very sorry, but I need to not see you again. And then they delete their contact information, they get off any apps they were using to connect with, and make it very, very clear that it's done. Okay. If they're with people, particularly with sexual compulsivity or addiction, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody for them to report into to stay accountable, which should not be the partner, even though the partner wants to know, but it can be so distressing. There are sex addiction, 12-step groups, other kinds of groups. There's SA, there's different kinds of groups or accountability. An individual therapist can be an accountable person where they can openly talk about where their thoughts are going. Are they going to pornography? Are they, what's going on in their sexual world? And eventually it's important for the other partner to know that, but a lot of times the shame can block it, and it can be easier to do it with a therapist, as long as the couples therapist is also working with the individual therapist, and there's a commitment that if there is any relapses or slipping, that will be brought up with the partner. It has to be. The reason you don't want to have the partner, though, be the accountability person is a lot of times it leads to this cat and mouse kind of dynamic, and you don't want to have that happen. So, and then there's the hiding, and then there's the trying to find out, and that's a problem. You do need to understand why it happened in the first place. A lot of times people are like, I have no idea why I did it. That's a problem, because if you don't know why you did it, you can do it again. Okay. It's hard to come up with a plan for why it's not going to happen again. And for real healing to take place, people have to understand why their partner did it. And there has to be a reasonable plan for why it's not going to happen again. Or the person, the betrayed person is going to have a hard time letting go of all the pain and really trusting again. If there's a reasonable understanding about how it happened, why it happened, and why it's not going to happen again, it makes it much easier to go through the attachment injury repair process, where you can create bonding events and you can have real long-term healing. And real long-term healing is possible, by the way. Just some of the research that I've been involved in, what we did is we surveyed the betrayed partners and whether they thought the relationship had healed. And there were people who felt like, yeah, our relationship has healed. It's usually a lot of work to get there, but you can get there. It can heal, but it's a lot of work. You have to kind of work on the problems that led the couple there to begin with, whether they were intrapsychic or interpersonal, personal issues, or between the couple, or both. There's usually some version of both. You have to repair those as well.
Yeah, and I guess you have to work a lot on helping the betraying partner to see their motives, right? Sometimes it's really not easy, and it takes maybe months or years of therapy to get to that deep intrapsychic level.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is one of the reasons that I developed the typology, which is really around motivations, because, and there's probably other motivations that I don't have, but at least in the research we've done on it, people identify with them, but it can lead people to kind of think about, okay, what was really going on? I wasn't burned out, for example. That's not what it was about. And it can help a good therapist go into, for example, with people who are into, power players, a lot of times helping, and most of the time, these are going to be men, not always, looking at gender issues, looking at focusing on their own sense of comfort with their gender, and helping them gain a sense of security without engaging in power maneuvers.
Mm.
You know, the more secure people are, the less they feel the need to exercise power.
Mm.
Anyway, there's a lot that can be done. And yes, sometimes it can take months or years. Sometimes it's fairly easy to see, and it can take less. But people really have to be able to own it, see it, and come up, and it's helpful for the couple together, ultimately, to come up with a decision on, or a plan, a strategy on how this is never going to happen again.
Thank you. And as we're getting to the end of our conversation, I only have two last questions. The first is about prevention, which I suppose is really important. What advice would you give to couples who would like to prevent infidelity in their relationship?
Such a great question. Thank you. I'm going to give a simple and then maybe a little bit more detailed answer to that. One is that one of the most important things couples can do is stay together, to stay bonded and connected. All couples have misunderstandings and minor betrayals. They get hurt. Healthy couples, long-term, are those that are able to repair and come together. Okay? Couples that are headed for trouble, not just with affairs, but anything, they are not good at repairing. They're not good at coming back together. They hold on to their hurts. They don't work them through. They get caught in patterns of avoiding, shutting down, or pursuing and blaming and criticizing, those kind of things. If you're in one of those patterns, you got to get out of it. Okay? Because, it's really important. And working with a good couples therapist, a lot of times people are scared to go to couples therapist. How do I find a good couples therapist? Some people think, only crazy people go to therapists. That's not true. Okay. A lot of times weak people go to therapists. Some of the strongest people I have ever seen are people who come to therapy. Mm. They're strong enough and courageous enough to be able to open up and be vulnerable. That takes courage and it takes strength. Strong people tend to go to therapy. Okay. So getting into a good couples therapist, getting into seeing somebody who has the proper training. Many therapists do couples therapy, but fewer really good couples therapists. Okay. The leading form of couples therapy is emotionally focused therapy. And there we have, I think, the most research and showing it's the most effective of all the different types. And finding a good emotionally focused therapist, ideally one who is certified or is on their way to certification, is something that can be very helpful. So that's important. Also, just taking care of your relationship. Okay. A relationship is a living entity in and of itself. Yes, it's two people, but you've got to be able to feed and nourish it. That means going on dates. That means resolving things before they become giant. And if they're giant, getting help, and you can't resolve them, getting help to resolve them. That means just making time. These days you've got two career people working with a busy career. They've got children. It's hard. It's hard to find time, but successful couples block off time. They find time to connect. They have date nights, ideally weekly. Okay. I've seen couples that are very healthy, but they really nurture their relationship. When there's difficulties, they support each other. They learn how to attune to each other, to be responsive to each other, to engage with each other in ways that keep their love alive. And you can keep your love alive. Okay. That's a really important thing. I want to address one other thing here that's kind of related to this. There's been these theories out there that, oh, more people have affairs these days because, we live longer and people aren't meant to be with each other for this long. Actually, most of the changes in longevity of human beings in the last 100 years has occurred because of infant mortality going way down. Many people did not make it until they were 10 years old, 150 years ago. The fact of the matter is that many couples become happier the longer they're together. And the research shows that most couples' sex lives improve over time. If there's major problems in your relationship, don't ignore them. Get some help. Work on being connected with each other. Work on being kind to each other. For so long, we got to have better communication, and good communication is helpful. But kindness and attunement and emotionally bonding is what is critical. And you work on maintaining that, developing that in a relationship, and staying connected. And that's going to help affair-proof your marriage.
It was really reassuring to hear that even if an affair actually happens, then there's hope for a long-term healing process. So it was, I think, really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that as well. And our time has basically ended. So I'd like to thank your time and effort you've put into this discussion. It was super helpful, and I'm incredibly grateful for you.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be on your show. I appreciate you and all the good work you are doing with this show. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you for our viewers for watching this episode. I'm going to see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Great. That's good. Bye-bye.
Köszönöm szépen, hogy velem tartottál ma. Számomra őszintén fontos a visszajelzésed, úgyhogy ha megosztanád a véleményed a témával kapcsolatban, vagy bármilyen kérdésed lenne, keress engem bizalommal Instagramon vagy e-mailben. Hamarosan találkozunk a következő epizódban, addig is ne feledd, élj könnyedén, szabadon.